Hi, everybody. I'm Dan Wells. I write horror, fantasy, and science fiction, and I talk about games on the internet. Today, I'm very excited to talk to you about Cthulhu. Call of Cthulhu has been, part of the role-playing game industry forever. This is actually the 7th edition of it, and I'm going to talk about it today. What I'm going to talk about specifically is the starter set rather than the core book, because that's what I have. Before we get into this, I do want to talk about Lovecraft a little bit, because public opinion has turned against him personally pretty strongly, and rightly so. He was shockingly, offensively racist. And so there's a lot of people that have kind of jettisoned his entire body of work because of that. And if that's what you want to do, if that's your preference, then I have no complaints about that. You read what you want to read and you play the games that you want to play. But I do want to put in a word for the Cthulhu mythos as something that has grown far beyond its fairly vile creator. Stories like Lovecraft Country by Matt Ruff. This is about a black family in Chicago post-World War II that deals with, over the course of the book, several different branches of the Cthulhu mythos. They've got, the monsters and the ghosts and the cultists and the aliens and the whole thing, and it's kind of a series of connected short stories and novellas. Super cool book. In fact, when Jordan Peele made Get Out, and it was a smashing success, and it made $1 zillion, and the studio said, okay, you have a blank check. What do you want to do next? He grabbed the rights to Lovecraft Country, and there's actually a TV series coming out that he is a producer on. And so there's a lot you can do with Call of Cthulhu and with this idea of, the mythos and the eldritch horrors and the kind of unexplainable darkness, what we call weird horror. Another good example is, a book that I genuinely love, Maplecroft by Sherry Priest. There's actually 2 books in this series. Maplecroft is the first one. The second one's called Chapelwood. This is the Borden Dispatches. And it's about Lizzie Borden. The very famous Lizzie Borden took an axe and gave her mother 50 whacks. She was kind of one of our very first American, not serial killers, because there was no cooling off period between the 2 murders, but kind of gruesomely murdered both of her parents, allegedly. What Sherry Priest does with this is she takes Lizzie Borden and casts her as the poorly understood heroine who is actually fighting against terrible monsters and, the deep ones and that whole idea, like the Innsmouth kind of branch of the Cthulhu mythos. And so kind of recontextualizes those murders as something heroic and fighting against a much larger and more terrible bad guy. Really, I mean, if you've ever read Sherry Priest, she's incredible. This is my favorite of her series. So anyway, it's there's a lot you can do with it, and it goes well beyond that. And there's some really fantastic, new, modern, awesome stuff that's been done with Cthulhu. Anyway, I don't need to defend Cthulhu to you. It's one of the hugest properties in the world. I just wanted to put that out there and say, hey, there's a lot of neat new stories that can be told in this world. But you're role players, so you know that you can tell neat new stories. So let's talk about what this game system gives you. So the starter set, I don't have a physical copy of it to show you, but what I do have is PDFs of the starters. And so if you open the actual box, I know there's dice in it, and I think there's a GM shield in it. What I have are the PDFs. So let's take a look at those PDFs. It comes in 3 books. And the first one is like the introduction to the world. And then the second one is an introduction to the rules. And then the third one is some adventures. Book 1, let me show you book 1, because as much as it kind of pains me to say this, this is the least useful of the books in the starter set, to the point that I almost suggest that you skip it entirely. What it is at the end of the day is choose your own adventure. Obviously, it's not called that because that's a brand name, but what it is it's designed to teach you some of the basics of the game system while introducing you to this concept of 1920s eldritch investigations. And it does so through a choose your own adventure system. And so there's all these sections. Each section is 5, 6, 7 paragraphs. There's like 270 of these, so it's a fairly large story. Unfortunately, it's not a very good one. And in particular, the beginning, you have to go through 6 or 7 sections, flip to number this, flip to number this, before anything interesting happens at all. It takes forever to get off the ground. And in the process, it's teaching you some of the mechanics of the game. So, it'll say, here, you're going to get in a carriage or a car that's going to drive you to a place. Now, while you're driving there, pick your attributes and put them into this spot. And then you'll read a little bit more about the drive, and then it will say, now we want you to calculate your secondary attributes. Do that. And then you'll read a little bit more about the drive, and then the driver will ask you, hey, what do you do for a living? And then it says, pick an occupation and give yourself some skills. And so it's kind of like the story includes the character generation process, but not in an interesting way. Anyway, I will stop harping on this. It's a choose-your-own-adventure story, which means from a role player's perspective, it's kind of railroady. There's actually several parts of it that say, here are 5 or 6 options. You can try them. When you realize that none of them help you, go to page 3 or whatever. And so once you get stuck in those loops, it becomes even more frustrating. Anyway, I respect what they tried to do, and I appreciate it. And I do love choose-your-own-adventure stories. But as an introduction to a role-playing game, honestly, just skip this one and go straight to book 2 that has all the rules in it. So let's talk about the rules. One of the things that 7th edition Call of Cthulhu does that I love is the way that it handles characteristics and roles. Okay? So we can go through and we can show. So here, once we get into the creating an investigator part, you pick your characteristics, and similar to the way some D&D campaigns work, it just gives you a set of numbers, like an array of numbers, and says plug these in wherever you want. You want to be really strong or smart or educated or attractive, whatever you want to be super good at, put your high ones there. Whatever you're going to be bad at, put your low ones there, and that ends up producing some cool balance. It's a nice system. But let's look at the character sheet. So these are the characteristics, and I've already got some slotted in here to show you what they do. This is actually a form-fillable PDF that is available for free on the publisher's website. That's KOCM. If you look up Call of Cthulhu RPG character sheet, this is the very first link. It takes you right there. There's a bunch of them. And it calculates everything for you. So for example, let's say that you have a 60 dex. So I'm going to put 60 in there. It automatically calculates these other things for you, which is really cool. Now, what are these other things? Well, a lot of games use difficulty numbers, right? You need to get this many successes, or you need to roll at least this high, and if something is really hard, you have to roll higher, and if it's really easy, you have to roll lower, and things like that. What this game does is similar to Warhammer Fantasy. It's a percentile-based system. So you've got these characteristics, and you need to roll under them, okay? But this top window right here, this is equal to half of this, and that's called your hard characteristic. And then this lower little window, that's equal to 1/5 of this, and that's called your extreme characteristic. And so rather than worrying about a sliding scale of modifiers and penalties the way Warhammer Fantasy does, rather than worry about specific levels of success, there's just 3 things. Is this normal, is this hard, or is it extreme? And then you roll it at your percentile dice, and if you get under whatever number you're supposed to get under, then you succeed. Congratulations, that's awesome. Skills work the same way. Skills, each of them has a little parentheses after it that says, that's like the untrained version. So natural world, 10%. Whether you're trained in it or not, you have a pretty good chance of knowing, what a tree is and things like that. You have a 9 out of 10 chance of not eating the poison berries or whatever it is that you're trying to do. But once you get skills and you stick these numbers in here, so let's put natural world, we'll give that a 70, bink, and then it gives you the hard and the extreme, the half and the 1/5. And so it's very smooth in play for the game master to say, all right, you want to eat some berries? Well, it's hard to tell these particular berries, so roll on your hard natural world. And so then, you roll, and if you get under 35, yay, good job, good for you. So it's a really neat system. One of the things that I love about this also is the way that it handles opposed rolls. So opposed rolls, let's say that you're trying to out-dex somebody, or let's use strength because strength is an obvious one. You're grappling with someone, you're wrestling with them, you're trying to overpower them, right? So you roll against your strength, and they roll against their strength. And if you both roll under your normal one, then you both succeed, but whoever has the higher strength characteristic wins. But if you roll under your normal one, and the opponent rolls under their hard level, then they win, because they succeeded at a more difficult level than you did. And so on. If they roll under the hard level, but you roll under the extreme level, well, then you beat them. Okay? And so it's just, I love this system of using the characteristics. It works for difficulty, it works for opposed rolls, it works for everything. It's very simple, but it also has layers of complexity to it. It's simple and robust at the same time, which is very hard to do, and they've done a really great job with it. So let's go back and look some more at character creation. So after you've put in these characteristics, I should say, then you calculate some secondary attributes. Like you saw here, when I typed in some dex, it immediately popped up a move rate. Okay, so you're going to have move rate, hit points, sanity, luck, magic points. There's also build and damage bonus, and that comes into play down here. Luck in particular is kind of a fun one, because that's like you find a truck. You're trying to escape an evil farm full of cultists, and you find a truck. Are the keys in it? If the game master has a specific plan in mind, then the game master will say, yes, there's keys, or no, there's not keys. If the game master doesn't care either way, then it's just up to you. And so rather than rolling a skill or a characteristic, which doesn't make a ton of sense, like no matter how good you are at looking for keys, that doesn't change whether or not the keys are actually there. You can roll on luck. Are the keys in the truck? Check your luck. Does this flashlight have enough battery left? Check your luck. And so it's a really neat little way of using that. Also, as you can see here, rather than just being a set static number, luck is something you can use up, which is a nice kind of karmic sense there. So you can use up luck and it goes away. Anyway, once you've calculated all those secondary attributes, then it's on to occupation and skills. And this is where, in a lot of games, you would encounter a character class. Like, if you're an antiquarian, then antiquarian comes with a specific set of skills and maybe some powers and things like that. This is much simpler. What Call of Cthulhu wants you to do is just kind of come up with something. And here are some examples, but you can make up your own. And as long as you and the game master agree with it, then it works. And all an occupation really is 8 skills. So for example, me. I'm an author for a living. So if I was a character in Call of Cthulhu, I would have art, literature, history, library use, natural world, or occult, other language, own language, psychology, and any one other skill, which hilariously is actually a really good description of my actual skill set as an author. So you come up with this, and then there's some instructions in here as to what numbers you put into those skills, but you give yourself 8 occupational skills, 8 professional skills, and then you round out your character with 4 more skills that can be anything. So maybe you're an author or an antiquarian or a private investigator, whatever it is, but on the side you love dancing, or you go hunting every weekend, or whatever it is. Give yourselves 4 skills that just represent other interests and hobbies. Okay? And that will fill out your list of skills. There's good descriptions of what all the skills do. And then, last of all, is background and final touches. So this is where the second page comes into place. All of this stuff: personal description, backstory, where are you from, what's important to you, what kind of personal connections do you have, etc., etc. And those are important. Those are especially important for a horror game, because everything you value is at some point going to be threatened or used against you, because that's the nature of horror. So it's a really neat little system of putting things together. And then, the rest of the book goes through. It talks about the luck rolls and the opposed rolls. How does combat work? One of the nice things, obviously this is a Cthulhu game, so madness and sanity is a huge part of it. Also, combat is a part of it, but for the most part, if you get into a fight with a monster, the monster is going to win. And so, much more important than the combat rules there's actually some pretty good chase rules of how you can run away from the monster to save your life. And that's just a neat little detail. It's got some, again, simple but robust rules to cover everything that you need. So, last of all, Book 3 is the adventures. And if you want to buy this starter set, Book 3 is why. If all you need are the rules, then just buy the core book, right? But if what you are looking for are adventure scenarios and ideas that you can play through with your friends, then this is a great purchase. That's what makes the starter set worth it, in my opinion. It's a little odd in that, of the 3 scenarios, the first one, Paper Chase, is actually designed to be played by one person, game master and one player. And I can understand their thought process here. They give you Book 1, that Choose Your Own Adventure, which is just the game master and nobody else. And then they give you Paper Chase, which is the game master and one player. And then after you've successfully done all of those and you're ready for another challenge, then you add in Edge of Darkness or Dead Man's Stomp, and you can do a game master with up to 5 players. And if you have never played a role-playing game before, then yes, I do think that this is a good system. I kind of mocked it, and I kind of said that Book 1, Alone Against the Flames, isn't really valuable. That's more likely than not, that's me as an experienced game master saying, this didn't do it for me and I don't need it. I can absolutely see that there is a market of people that do. People who don't know how to run a role-playing game, people who maybe have never played a role-playing game. This starter set is going to hold your hand all the way through and introduce you to each new concept bit by bit and piece by piece until you are, in the end, running your own games for 2 to 5 players. And that's great. For the majority, I suspect, of players, you're not going to need that kind of railroady choose your own adventure, and you might not even be able to use this Paper Chase. If you've got a group of players to play with, you either need several scenarios for one player or several scenarios for a group of players. So having both, there might be one or more of them that you just simply can't use. In fact, in the Paper Chase section, in fact, let's click on it and go there. It does talk about how to use it for multiple people. If you have 2 investigators, what is that going to do? How is that going to change things? What's going on? So, there's some rules for it to make it work. But I do think a good game master who knows what they're doing is going to be able to take any of these 3 scenarios and use them for any number of players. Because the system is relatively simple and easily adjustable, and you can make it work. And the really good thing, the part you've been waiting to hear, is that all 3 of these adventures are actually awesome. They have good ideas, they explore different branches of the mythos, they represent different kinds of adventures and different kinds of investigations and villains and monsters and so on that you can fight. So they do a really good job as an overview and introduction to the setting and the world. And the adventures in and of themselves are compelling and fun to play through. So hooray for that. So there you go. At the end of the day, if all you want is the rules, buy the core book instead. If you either have never role-played before, the starter set will help you, or if you have role-played before, but you don't really know, maybe all you've ever done before is D&D or Pathfinder or kind of medieval stuff, and you're not sure how to put together. Your friends want to play Call of Cthulhu, but you don't know how to build an adventure that isn't about a dungeon or an orc or whatever. This has got your back. And there's 3 really good, really solid adventures in here, and all the rules you need to play what is, at the end of the day, a very simple game. So, that is my review of this game for you. The chance to play through some stories, to take this Cthulhu mythos and all of the really weird science and the eldritch horror and the kind of hopeless dread at the center of it. How can you take that and spin it out and tell your own stories and do exciting new things with it? This starter set is going to help you do everything that you need to do. So, anyway, check it out. I'm Dan Wells, and you are awesome. Bye.